Oh, what's up, guys? Combat Addict here. So Wednesdays, that's gonna be the MMA show. Welcome to the MMA show, what I will call the Combat Review. We got a lot of stuff to talk about, stuff that I've actually wanted to talk about for a while now, ever since um, uh, Gaethje Ferguson. Um, Actually, man, even before that, because we're gonna get to that. But point is, uh, MMA review is what's going down right now. Just so you guys know, I got my social media sorted out and dealt with. I got my Twitter. It is at addict_combat, and my Instagram is straight up just the combat addict. So if you want to follow me on those sites, then you can do that. I'll be posting videos, updates to when things are coming out, and from time to time something funny that I like, or just my opinions about fighters and things that are going on. So if you're interested, hit those links up. But we're going to start with something that, if you're a fan of the MMA world, you definitely have heard about, the GOAT debate. Now, the GOAT debate, before we get into all of the tweets that were sent out by 4 or 5 different fighters, first thing we're going to talk about is Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo has retired, okay? Henry Cejudo beat Dominic Cruz, arguably one of the greatest bantamweights, well, actually probably the greatest bantamweight of all time. And he didn't just beat him, he finished him in what was, I think, like the 3rd round or something like that. He straight up finished him. So, while people were thinking that stoppage was questionable, I just want to say right now that if you go back and you watch that fight, there is a definite moment where Dominic Cruz is on the floor like this, not putting his hands over his head at all. His arms aren't moving at all. He's just getting punched, and he had taken a giant knee to the face right before that. So as a referee, being responsible for this individual's life, man, you step in at that point. And while if he had chosen not to step in, maybe like 2 seconds, later, or 2 seconds earlier, like if he had chosen just to not step in, and give it a couple more seconds, he might have seen a little bit of life in Dominic Cruz. But the truth of the matter is, by the time he had made the decision to step in, Dominic was not moving, and any movement past that point was irrelevant, because it's like, well, he made the decision to stop it. He saw him not moving. By the time he started moving again, the stoppage was already in process. So I don't really think that there's anything wrong with the stoppage. I think that it could have gone either way. I mean, I called the fight the same time the ref did. I said it's over. You know what I mean? But if the ref let it go and Dominic got back up, I would have been like, okay, I mean, that's fucked up for Dominic. He's probably going to, have some really fucked up head trauma later, but fight's still going. But that's not what happened, all right? Cejudo wins, and at the press conference, he tells everybody that he is not only retiring, but that he is the greatest combat athlete of all time. He is concluded, and this is not the first time he has said this, by the way, that he's the greatest, like pound for pound. Before this fight, and I'll see if I can find the video, Cejudo is at a table with, who is it? Khabib, Gaethje was there, and some crazy hardcore judo champion, Olympic champion, and they are arguing about what sports are more difficult, judo or wrestling. And Cejudo believes that wrestling is the most difficult sport. It is like the greatest sport in the world, and is the most difficult. This girl who's doing judo is not really agreeing with that. But at some point, Cejudo basically looks at Khabib, who, by the way, is 28-0, and goes, "Who is the greatest pound for pound of all time right now? Like, who is the greatest? Like, tell me." Looking Khabib right in the face, and Khabib, being Khabib, I don't even think he believes this, goes, "You're the greatest. You're the greatest right now. You are the greatest fighter right now." Which, I'm gonna be straight with you. I don't even think Habib believes that. And to be honest, Habib arguably right now is the greatest in the sense that there is no one else in UFC history that I know of who has ever been 28-0. He's like, what, 12-0 in the UFC? Or something like that? That's unheard of. Not only that, he fought... Man, you gotta understand. He finished Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor. Dustin Poirier fought Max Holloway, who arguably was one of the greatest featherweights of all time, and beat him. While it was at lightweight, the point is, he fucking beat him. Like, pretty conclusively beat Max Holloway. And then Habib took him out. Conor McGregor starched Jose Aldo. Whether or not you want to argue it was a one shot punch, lucky punch, whatever, you want to argue that, and then he starches Eddie Alvarez. I'm just saying that Habib beat both of these giants basically, like in terms of what they've accomplished. Poirier's been around for a while. He's a vet. He knows what he's doing. He fought for the interim title, and he was finished by Habib. Conor McGregor is arguably one of the greatest combat athletes that exists of all time right now, and he was also finished by Habib. Cejudo, and this is where we're going to get to Cejudo. Cejudo is a great athlete, one of the greatest of all time. Okay? But Cejudo's claim to the greatest of all time is extremely flawed. Not just because there are other people around him who have also accomplished amazing things, like Habib, like GSP, like Anderson Silva. These people who, I'm not gonna even talk about John Jones. Fuck John. He fucking is a juice head. He's not even in this conversation. All right. He's almost ignoring all of these guys who, in terms of accomplishment, have way more over him, and he is focusing on defeating Demetrius Johnson and defeating Dominic Cruz. And I don't include TJ Dillashaw for a reason. If you guys watched the TJ Dillashaw-Henry Cejudo fight, and if you've seen TJ Dillashaw fight in the past, you knew that TJ Dillashaw looked sickly. TJ Dillashaw did not even, you gotta understand, he was compromised as far as I'm concerned going into that fight. So when Henry Cejudo won, he won the fight. No bullshit. He definitely won. I don't think there was anything really wrong with the stoppage. TJ was getting fucked up right out of the gate. But here's the thing. If he fought TJ healthy, I don't think that fight, even if he won the fight, would have gone the same way. I mean, he defended his 125 belt one time against a compromised opponent. Okay, so somebody wants to say, well, what about before that? He beats Demetrius Johnson, who everybody says is arguably the greatest martial artist, complete martial artist of all time. Like, he literally does and has everything. Okay. First off, let's even say that he is the greatest of all time. Let's say Demetrius Johnson is the greatest MMA fighter of all time. Okay? Even if that's true, Henry Cejudo beats Demetrius Johnson by a razor-thin margin. Once. Alright? what you got to understand is that means you beat one of the greatest of all time, but on a given day. If you guys ran that fight back a week later, Demetrius would have won. So it's not conclusive to me that you are now the greatest of all time because you beat Demetrius Johnson once. Especially considering Demetrius Johnson held on to the title for what, like 12 fights? Something ridiculous like that? And you haven't even... So because you beat the guy who's held the belt for a really long time, you're now the greatest of all time? That doesn't make any sense to me. To me, that's nonsensical. I mean, I can't remember how old Demetrius Johnson was when that fight took place, but Demetrius Johnson, I think, hurt his foot, he said. I think Demetrius Johnson could be getting older. There could be so many factors that make it so that you can beat him. That doesn't mean that you're the best now. It means that you might be one of the best, but you have to now... When the guard changes, you need to carry the torch. You can't just take the torch and then drop it like, okay, I'm the shit now. You gotta fucking do something with it. And I don't count TJ Dillashaw's fight as anything towards Henry Cejudo's credit as one of the greatest of all time. As a good fighter, maybe, but even then, it's like, honestly, man, like, that was a fucking bulldozing that was almost inevitable once you saw how depleted TJ Dillashaw was. So then you want to say, okay, well, what about Marlon Moraes, right? Marlon Moraes was a tough motherfucker. Like, he's the real deal. Marlon Moraes is not a joke. That was a legitimate title fight, and he legitimately took the 135 belt. Okay? I will say he legitimately took the vacant belt. Alright? Now, as far as I'm concerned, that is just a title fight. That is not a defining moment. That's not like Frankie Edgar Gray Maynard. You know what I'm saying? It's not like it's you know what it isn't? It isn't an Israel Adesanya, Kevin Gastelum, top of the heap, like proper test for the greatest of all time. It's a test for being a champion, but it's not a test for like, you're the greatest of all time. I don't think that you can beat Marlon Moraes, Demetrius Johnson, and then be like, I'm the greatest of all time. That doesn't work that way. And so now, this is Henry's final point, and his final fight of relevance, as far as I'm concerned. He beats Dominic Cruz, and he finishes Dominic Cruz. Okay. Mind you, Dominic Cruz has been injured and in and out of the cage for like 4 years now. Maybe more. Like, this guy has literally missed so much of his career. So, as a top bantamweight who never really lost the belt, it's not, as far as I'm concerned, as if he is still in the heat of his I don't want to say he's not in his prime, because I think he's only like 35 or something like that. But even that, it's like, my whole point is that I don't think you could say that he is as sharp as he would be if he was active the entire time, right? Like, there's a whole lick of cage experience that he just missed out on during his prime due to injuries and things like that. So you're not really fighting, like, you're fighting the greatest bantamweight of all time, but that's not enough. He's the greatest bantamweight of all time, but he's also the most compromised bantamweight of all time, as far as I'm concerned. Which means that your job then is not to beat him once and be like, I am the shit, but to beat him and then supersede and surpass everything that he's done up until that point. That's what you have to do. You can't just beat him and, okay, well, now I'm the best flyweight and the best bantamweight of all time because I beat 2 champions. It doesn't work like that. Conor McGregor beat 2 champions. He's not the greatest featherweight of all time and the greatest lightweight of all time now. It doesn't work that way. Okay? Not only that, but I have to say this. Henry, if you really wanna do this thing where I beat this guy and he was this good, so I am now the greatest of all time. Okay, you realize that theoretically, Cody Garbrandt is or was the greatest bantamweight of all time. You recognize that, right? Because he beat Dominic Cruz. Okay? He beat Dominic Cruz. So, and of course TJ Dillashaw beat Cody Garbrandt and you beat TJ Dillashaw. But as I've already said, I do not count that as a real victory or test of your skills. You have to fight Cody Garbrandt under that logic. Because... And here's the thing. Not only that, but you couldn't even claim that Dominic Cruz was the greatest bantamweight of all time when you fought him because he was so thoroughly humiliated by Cody Garbrandt. According to your logic. Because according to your logic, you beat a champion one time and you take all their clout. Which is bullshit. That's not how it works. You have to fucking earn this shit, and you gotta be there long enough to solidify your position. You can't just... okay, if Israel Adesanya fucking retires right now, he's like, I beat Anderson Silva, I am the greatest middleweight of all time, I finished Robert Whittaker, who went 10 rounds with Romero, I am the greatest of all time. Everyone would be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Yes, Henry, you have an Olympic gold medal, but do you know who else has an Olympic medal? I'm pretty sure DC does. I'm pretty sure DC is also an Olympic wrestling medalist. And you know what DC did? DC took the heavyweight championship. I'm not gonna lie, that is probably a lot harder to do. At his size, that is a huge disadvantage. Not only that, the only people he's really lost to, aside from Stipe Miocic, who, up to date, is the best, heavyweight of all time in terms of title defenses, he only really lost to John Jones, who, as far as I'm concerned, is a fucking juice piggy. Not only that, but he actually gave John Jones a proper run for his money in most of their fights. And the physical attributes that he was up against are exponentially, greater than the physical attributes that you face in your fights. When you fight somebody, they're the same fucking size as you. So, as far as I'm concerned, for you to even think to say, I am the greatest combat athlete of all time, when somebody like Daniel Cormier isn't even fucking retired yet, that blows my fucking mind. I can't even believe that. And the fact that you would say it simply because you beat maybe 2 properly notable names and one relatively decent fighter, you beat a couple guys and now you're the greatest of all time. It doesn't work like that, man. It does not work like that. Max Holloway beat the fuck out of Jose Aldo twice. Max Holloway is not out here talking about how he's the greatest of all time. Max Holloway still has a lot to prove, and the truth of the matter is he wasn't the greatest of all time as of yet. Because he lost to Alexander Volkanovski. Somebody figured him out, and Max needs to come back and prove that he can beat someone like Volkanovski. That he can overcome those odds. But the thing is, if he just fucking retired after he beat Jose Aldo, nobody could debate with him about whether or not he was the greatest of all time, because he just fucking mic dropped and left. That's what Henry's doing. Makes no fucking sense. I love Henry. He's one of my favorite fighters. I'm sorry to see him go, but I'm very happy for him, and I want him to succeed in his life as a parent. But honestly, man, I do not think you're the greatest of all time. I think that's an incredibly bold thing to say when you've got so much fucking talent in the organization presently and in the past. That's just crazy to me, man. It makes no sense. But yeah, he's fucking retiring, and I can tell that he's been thinking a lot about this, man. I think that he's trying to get his money and get out. I think he's come to the conclusion that all this this pain and suffering and people trying to kill each other in cages is just not worth the rest of his life. And I think that he's trying to make himself feel better about leaving early by saying that he's the greatest of all time, because the truth of the matter is he could be the greatest of all time if he kept fighting and proved it, and proved that, like, you know, even in adversity and with new up and comers, with people who are in their prime with fresh blood, that he can still hold on to the title. But he doesn't want to do that anymore. To do that, he would need to sacrifice a lot, including his family life. And I think he's like 34 or something like that, and he doesn't have a kid. And you can tell when you hear him talk at the press conference that bothers him. So, Henry, I'm happy for you, man. Do your thing, but you are not the greatest of all time. I'm sorry. In any case, I think that Henry's talk of this, I'm the greatest of all time, combat athlete of all time, better than Muhammad Ali, better than Mike Tyson, better than all these guys, right? It sparked something in Conor McGregor. Because Conor McGregor created something on Twitter called the GOAT thread. This is Conor McGregor's ranking of who the greatest MMA fighters of all time are. And I think the list goes something like this. It's Anderson Silva number 1, or Conor McGregor and Anderson Silva number 1. Or Anderson Silva number 1, Conor McGregor 2, GSP 3, Jones 4. I think that's what his list was. And he like put his reasoning out, you know, how long you held the belt, how many times you lost, how many controversial wins you have, the styles of finishes you have. He basically lays out what you would need to be the greatest combat athlete of all time. And his argument for himself being the GOAT is that he has finishes in all, like, in 3 divisions. He's been a champion in 2 divisions. And he just believes that he is the best. I don't think that Conor McGregor is the greatest of all time. I think that he could be the greatest of all time, but I don't think that he's the greatest of all time. First off, his last fight, he lost to Khabib. So, I mean, if you want to talk about the most complete MMA fighter, and, you know, that's what we're talking about, then I guess Khabib would be disqualified solely for the fact that Khabib is notorious for, no pun intended, for his ground game and not really his striking. He's not a complete fighter. Khabib is not going to fucking head kick you. So if we're going to talk about the greatest of all time in completeness, then Khabib is automatically disqualified. But if we're just going to talk about dominance and how you approach MMA, irrespective of your style, then as far as I'm concerned, Khabib is the GOAT. Like, he's one of the greatest of all time, all fucking time. Like, he's maybe not the GOAT right now, but unless somebody finds a way to beat him, he's gonna be the GOAT. Like, because he's, like, unstoppable. And I think that the person that can beat him is coming up, Justin Gaethje. We will talk about this later. But Conor, as long as Khabib has that win over you, you're not the greatest of all time. Because, to be honest, he pretty much he dominated most of that fight, and then he finished you. And I guess my point is, I mean, it's obviously one finish doesn't make you the greatest of all time. Like I said, Khabib still got work to do, but Conor definitely is not the greatest of all time as a result of that happening. So, anyways, that's just my opinion. But everybody else in the fucking MMA world, all these other fighters, are like, what the fuck? John Jones is like we already know who the greatest of all time is, even though he's a fucking juice head, and I don't give a shit what John has to say. And who else did we get in the conversation? Like, Conor's talking shit, and then fucking Nate Diaz comes out and starts tweeting too, and I'll read like some of what he said here.